All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight and joining us for this pre-rulemaking session. We are really excited to get your feedback and your comments on the use of public waters rules and the revisions that we're proposing. Nothing that we have proposed thus far is set in stone. We really want to get feedback and make additional changes. This is kind of like a brainstorming session, if you will. So that's why we changed the format a little bit. Our typical public meetings is that everyone gets up and stands and speaks for 2 minutes and everybody takes turns. But for this, we wanted to really focus on specific topics that we want to get into the weeds a little bit more about, and that we know people have a lot of comments about. So we'll like do topic by topic, and we'll just have more of a discussion-based forum. And Laura is going to give an introductory slideshow about what our proposed changes are and how this meeting is going to flow. And I apologize again for all the technical difficulties. For those who are online, we don't have a projector working or a speaker working, but we're making do, and we're going to survive. So the plan is that if you have a question or comment online, we're going to do our best to hear you, but if you could speak really loudly and clearly, that would be helpful. So go ahead, Laura.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. And also Jenny Austin is our program manager for the Lakes and Ponds program. I don't know if that was mentioned. And I'm Laura DeLugalecki. I work in the Lakes and Ponds program as the Outreach and Policy Coordinator. And we also have Laura Woods here in the Lakes and Ponds program. And Laura works in the regulatory section, and she's here helping out tonight. So we do have this microphone here, which doesn't have a speaker in the room, but this is how the folks online can hear us. So when it's time for the discussion portion, if you have a comment or a question, please make sure that you speak into this microphone and we can pass it around. All right, so I did have some slides. Is that your computer or is that? Yeah. Oh, it's. Okay, sorry. All right, so I have an agenda slide that maybe you guys can see up on the tiny screen, but basically I want to take about 20 minutes to go over our proposed changes to the use of public waters rules. Okay. So we want to take about 20 minutes to kind of go over the use of public waters rules and our proposed changes. I also want to remind everyone online to please remain muted because it causes some feedback. And this is going to be recorded and it'll be on our use of public waters rulemaking webpage, where last night's meeting is already posted up there. So I'll have this one up hopefully tomorrow. But then after the kind of introduction to the use of public waters rules and the overview of what we're proposing, we're going to dedicate most of the meeting to what we're calling topical conversations. So we've highlighted a couple things that we were hoping to get specific feedback on based on our proposed changes, but then we've also saved some space to talk about other topics that might be important to folks. Okay, so before the agency initiates rulemaking, the process is to begin with pre-rulemaking, and that's where we are right now. And this is a time when we kind of take some ideas and thoughts and we come out to the public and we get feedback. So as Jenny said, nothing is set in stone at this point. We're going to share with you some of our proposed changes based on our experience over the last 2 years and a lot of the feedback we've gotten. We've received a lot of valuable feedback from the public, but we really are here to hear your feedback, suggestions, whether it's wording or edits or new things we haven't really thought about. So briefly, I want to just kind of over the next 20 minutes or so talk about a little bit of the context and history of the use of public waters rules, and then talk about the existing wake sports rule that we have, and then I'll go through the proposed changes that we have to the rule. So the use of public waters statute, known as 1424, was enacted by the legislature in 1969, and it basically gave the authority for an entity to manage recreational uses on public waters. And for a long time, that entity was the Water Resources Board, that eventually became the Water Resources Panel. And the board's role was to listen to petitions and proposals to make a specific rule about a specific lake. And they would review those petitions and promulgate rulemaking when they decided to go through with it. And they would make specific rules about specific lakes. But then in 1994, they came up with a set of formalized rules that applied to all water bodies across the state, and they called it the Use of Public Waters Rules. And this is the document we have today, and that was the first iteration of it. But it's changed over time. But the rulemaking authority was passed to the agency in 2012. And that set of rules that they developed in 1994 included a set of rules for all lakes across the state, concerning speed limits and where certain size boats could be. But then it also kept an appendix of all those lake specific rules that were made prior to the rules being in place. So the use of public waters rules can regulate, well, it was designed to manage conflicts between recreational uses. And it's allowed to regulate vessels, speed limits, size of boats and motors, and regulate time of day or locations that those uses can be done. When the Agency of Natural Resources is charged with making decisions about rulemaking for the use of public waters rules, we have kind of a different role than other entities might have, because as a member of the executive branch, as part of the state agency, we have to balance multiple considerations as part of our charge. We have to balance environmental impacts with questions about access to public waters. So when we make decisions as an agency, we have to be very consistent across the state to public state waters. We have to be objective. We have to base our decisions in science or technical information, some sort of basis that can be applied consistently. And this is different than how the legislature or the Water Resources Board could react to public opinion. Reacting to public opinion really isn't within our charge. Our decisions have to be made on this consistent technical basis. So, for example, if we get a lot of opinions, a lot of comments that we should ban wake sports statewide, that's really beyond our authority. That's not something that we can do, because we really have to take access into account. And so a complete prohibition of wake sports across the state is off the table for a state agency. We are charged with regulating uses with the least restrictive approach, and it cannot be arbitrary. And a statewide ban is not the least restrictive approach. It can be easily considered arbitrary and not legally defensible. So that's not really within our authority, but that is something that the legislature could potentially contemplate. So I just kind of wanted to put a context on what the state agency is able to do and how we're able to use the use of public waters rules. So many of you, I'm sure most of you are aware that we've had a new wake sports rule in place since April of 2024. So it's been a little over a year, and a lot of thought and input and compromise went into making this new rule and creating a definition of a wake sport zone that was objective, based on technical information, and protective of the resource. So it was designed to prevent erosion along the shoreline and prevent turbidity on the lake bed. It was meant to be protective and to meet Vermont's water quality goals. And it was the most protective rule in the country, and it still is. It limited wake sports to 30 inland lakes around the state. And it included decontamination provisions that were specific to wake boats, including a home lake sticker program and a proof of decontamination requirement. And that rule is still in place now. But just as we were adopting the new rule, as we were going through the formal rulemaking process, we began to hear feedback about some items that we didn't fully consider, or at least there was the perception that we didn't fully consider safety for other users in the water with the new wake sports rule, and that we didn't fully contemplate the cumulative impacts of multiple boats in the wake sports zone. We also heard feedback about impacts to loon nesting sites from wake sports. And these are all very valid points. And, the use of public waters rules is a living document. It's meant to be something that we can return to. I mean, over time, as new issues come up, as new information comes up, additional rulemaking is done. That's what happened with personal watercraft like jet skis and seaplanes. So there's a, ability to look back and make changes. And these are some really important considerations to think about as we move forward in this rulemaking process. But then perhaps beyond some issues we know that could use a re-examination, we also know that when it came to implementing the rule as written, that we had some really tough issues implementing the home lake rule. Based on the timing of the adoption of the new rule, we knew in that first summer that we weren't going to have like a completely robust sticker program in place, up and running. But we began planning for the future and really digging into how we could implement this in the long term. And that's when we realized the way it was written, the resources available to us, that there were some big issues with the home lake rule and the proof of decontamination, and that we would have to re-examine that through rulemaking going forward. And so I'll be talking about that momentarily. On the screen, which the people in the room may or may not be able to see, is the actual text of the home lake rule. And basically, it says that a boat should stay in one lake per year and get a sticker to represent that lake that they're staying in. But if the operator of that wake boat wants to travel between lakes, then they need to get a decontamination. And this was very difficult to implement exactly as written for multiple reasons. We don't really have a way to track wake boats across the state or coming in and out of Vermont. The Department of Motor Vehicles does not register whether or not a boat is a wake boat, and they're not willing to begin collecting that data. That's okay. That's okay. This is a huge challenge. Okay, all right. So this is a huge challenge to administering a sticker program, and I don't think that was fully understood when that requirement was added into the rule. And then tracking wake boats coming from other states and Canada and neighboring states, it's not really something that we have the ability. There's no way to do this. There's no infrastructure or capacity to do this. So right there, those were some huge issues immediately. So what we did was we came up with a working solution for last year and this year. And it basically said, okay, since we can't identify all these wake boats and get stickers for them, we are just going to require that when wake boats travel between water bodies, they must be decontaminated following our guidelines. So although they didn't have a sticker, we're basically requiring the exact same thing that the home lake rule said. If a wake boat travels in between lakes, then they have to be decontaminated. So it's basically a functionally equivalent fix. And I just want to say that we have the same goal as the public. We want to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species, and that this provision was really well-meaning, but under our current conditions, it's not really workable, and I don't think that the sticker provides any extra protection. We have a lot of existing regulatory tools, especially under 1444, the AIS transport rule, aquatic invasive species transport law. And we can more heavily rely on those existing tools to kind of amp up our decontamination requirements. And there's definitely room for improvement. And this is something that we're having a lot of discussions about now. There are ways to make the program more robust, but we can work on that existing system, the existing program and efforts and messaging to make decontamination better across the state. Because trying to find a way to do the sticker program is a huge administrative burden for less than 1% of the boats in the state. In 2024, there were 187 wake boats recorded to be launched at public access areas. And out of those 187 boats launched, 167 of them were returning to the same water body they were the last launch. So that means about 20 boats were traveling in between water bodies that we have recorded, a recording of based on their visits to access areas. And so that's a really, really small percentage, and it would be a huge lift to make stickers for such a small percentage of boats when we can just require that they receive decontamination. So based on that information, just kind of a summary of where we are now. So I wanted to switch gears and talk about our proposed changes to the use of public waters rules. I'm going to talk specifically about the changes to the rules that affect wake sports, and then decontamination and the home lake rule, and then our other proposed changes. And then we'll begin the discussion portion. So one of the big points that we want to change is the definition of a wake sports zone. We received a lot of feedback from the public concerning use conflicts in some of the smaller end of the wake sports eligible lakes. A lot of people talked about that exclusionary impact of a wake boat being in a smaller wake sports zone and all other users leaving, or a wake boat dominating a smaller wake sports zone. And so what we did was we have three components that we are adding to the definition of a wake sport zone. So a wake sport zone should be at least 3,000 feet in length, contain 100 contiguous acres of lake that is at least 500 feet from shore on all sides and 20 feet deep. And then we propose having some shape normalization to the wake sport zone to take out odd ends. And we received this feedback from a lot of folks recently, just, that there are some like skinnier portions that it doesn't really make sense to boat in and out of. So it was meant to benefit both the wake sports operator to know they're in the zone and to just make it more intuitive. So I'll just kind of talk about those 3 points a little bit. The 3,000-foot length came from some information we had about wake boats typically traveling about 10 to 12 miles an hour and imagining about a 3-minute run. So that equals 3,000 feet in length. The shape normalization, as I mentioned, this is to kind of remove the dog legs to make a more uniform shape of the wake sport zone, to kind of accommodate practical usage within the wake sport zone, create a little bit of buffer so that, if there's changes in water level, if there's fluctuation, kind of just keeps us sure that wake sports are happening inside the wake sport zone, and it improves compliance so that boaters know that they're definitely in the zone. So this is like the best part to have the presentation for, is that this is just some demonstrations showing what that shape normalization would look like. So on the bottom is the current wake sport zone and the top is the proposed. It just kind of takes off some of those skinnier areas. That's Echo Lake. And then I have a picture here of Derby in Salem, and you can see it's real jagged on one side and kind of just smooths it out. And it doesn't dramatically change the size of the wake sport zone. And then the 100-acre change, we felt like this was more protective of normal uses, and this would be a less restrictive approach than prohibiting wake sports, but it could address the cumulative impacts of multiple uses. And the way this was developed was we took that, if we were looking at wake sport zones that are at least 3,000 feet, and you're imagining a wake boat traveling that distance, and we say that a wake boat's wave has about 500 feet of impact from either side. So what that makes is a 1,000 foot wide by 3,000 foot long rectangle. And we put those rectangles over wake sport zones. And on lakes that were less than 100 acres, you couldn't really fit a whole rectangle. So it kind of seemed like if we were talking about cumulative impacts, multiple uses being able to be in the wake sport zone, then you would want to have more than one of those rectangles. So here's another, this is an image of Lake Fairley, which is about 90 some acres under the new proposed conditions. And if you can see that image, that there's really, if one wake boat is using that space, the argument is that other uses would be in conflict. But once you move above 100 acres, there's more rectangles, there's more opportunity for multiple uses. So here's Crystal Lake. As the lakes get bigger, obviously there's more rectangles, there's less conflict, or the potential for less conflict. So this is what the 30 wake sports eligible lakes that we currently have now, this is what it would look like under this proposed wake sports definition. For those of you in the room, I'll just say this out loud. So the lakes that would no longer be eligible for wake sports that currently are Lake Iroquois, Joe's Pond, Hortonia, Waterbury Reservoir, Sunset Lake in Orwell, Miles Pond, Shadow Lake in Glover, Holland Pond, Peachum Pond, Lake Parker, and Lake Fairley. So it would take us to 18 wake sports eligible lakes. There's also one lake on there that is highlighted orange. It's Molly's Falls Reservoir, and this is just an interesting case and I wanted to highlight it because it's one of the fixes we want to make in the use of public waters rules. But Molly's Falls, under the current rules, is wake sports eligible. However, shortly after the rule went into effect, the water level was permanently lowered, and it actually shrank the amount of space available, and it no longer meets the criteria for supporting a wake sport zone. However, the way the use of public waters rules works is in order to change anything in it, you have to go through formal rulemaking. We can't say, oh, it doesn't meet the criteria, we'll just take it off the list. We actually have to go through this 6 or 8 month rulemaking period. So we propose adding some flexibility into the rules to address these situations like this, which probably will not happen very much, but we just don't want to have to do that again. So there are these appendices in the use of public waters rules, and in Appendix A, that's where all the lake-specific rules are listed. And so it would say wake sports prohibited. And we propose, if there are the changing conditions that makes the lake wake sports eligible or not, that rather than having to go through rulemaking and change these appendices, that we would have some flexibility, that we would keep a agency managed list updated annually, and that any changes would still have to go through a public process, but it would be more condensed, and it would have to be still based on criteria, whether or not you're wake sports eligible. So this is the language that we have proposed. It says the secretary may update a defined wake sports zone or the eligibility of a lake, pond, or reservoir to allow or prohibit wake sports on an annual basis should the surface water level, or other characteristics alter wake sports eligibility as defined in section 5.18. That's the wake sports zone definition. Or should a lake management activity or scientific research within the body of water result in the potential for wake sports to negatively impact water quality, a lake management activity or scientific research. And the secretary shall proceed with public outreach process as defined in section 2 to determine whether to proceed with a change to wake sports eligibility of a water body. So beyond that, the other two items that we have that are related to wake sports that we're proposing is currently there's a requirement that that all boats, everybody stay 300 feet, all vessels stay 300 feet from loon nesting sites during loon nesting season, and we proposed increasing that to 500 feet. And then we proposed adding a safety offset to replace the existing 200-foot offset for wake sports to 500 feet. And then as far as decontamination and the home lake rule, we propose to remove the home lake provision within the wake sports rule based on the, some of the what I talked about earlier about our lack of capacity, our ability to collect this information and issue stickers, and it doesn't seem to add any added protection. And to remove the proof of decontamination requirement because there is no infrastructure for this provision and it's not enforceable. But we want to preserve the intent of this section of the rule, which is aquatic invasive species spread prevention. And we propose in its place to add a decontamination section to the use of public waters rules. So what we plan to do, there's a section in the use of public waters rules that applies to all lakes and ponds and all watercraft. So this is not targeted at wake boats. This is for all boats. But we want to clarify the statutory authority on the prohibition and the transportation of aquatic invasive species. We want to more strongly reference inspection and decontamination protocols. We want to reference the greeter inspection manual. We want to identify the roles and responsibilities of the greeters and the agencies, the trainings that they're required to receive. We want to really amplify that work and then include information about enforcement and violations in the rules to clarify the enforcement framework and reference the penalties for AIS transport. Online on our Lakes and Ponds rulemaking webpage, we have a summary document that shows it's a tracked changes document. So you can see all the proposed changes and we may update it periodically, but there are some small administrative type fixes. There are some errors in the language. So there's just some updating that we would like to do. And we want to add some clarification and reference other statutes. For example, the motor vehicles statute also regulates how boats are used in the water. And so we want to kind of link to some of those public safety concerns in the use of public waters rules. Another section that we propose to update is municipal delegation. So currently in the statute, there's some sparse language about municipal delegation. That basically means that municipalities can request from the agency to have control over the use of public waters rules. In all the history of the use of public waters rules, it's only been used a few times, and this has been specifically for towns to have delegation over mooring fields. In fact, Newport has municipal delegation for mooring fields. But we want to, because there was almost nothing in the rules about this, we wanted to clarify it, and we linked it to statute, what's allowed and what's not. We wanted to just clarify whether delegation could be partial for just one part of the use of public waters rules or whether it could be all of them. We wanted to have the process for submitting a delegation request, roles and responsibilities, all the kind of liability, cost responsibilities. And importantly, the statute says that a delegated municipality has to follow the same rules that the state does. So a municipality can't receive delegation and then make up rules that are not in accordance with the use of public waters rules. And then in the section that applies to all lakes, we wanted to add a section on temporary use restrictions for emergencies. And the reason that we want to add this is in the last 2 summers with the extreme flooding, there were multiple scenarios in which lake levels were very high and folks came and recreated on these lakes, creating wakes and making some flooding situations worse for people. And we received a lot of comments from the public, like, can't you tell them to stop? And we don't have that authority currently. So this would really be under a declaration of emergency, like flooding, that we could temporarily for 15 days call an area or a water body a no wake zone just to, prevent further damage in that kind of scenario. Or if there were like a spill or something, there could be multiple different types of emergency declarations. Okay, so that's in a nutshell all of our proposed changes. Like I said, there's lots of small little like administrative type changes. And if you see something in the documents and you have questions, please reach out. So I have a diagram up for those of you in the room that, I don't know if you can see it, but it's kind of a flow chart of our plan. So right now we're in this pre-rulemaking phase. And like I said, what we have proposed, nothing is set in stone. This is what we've kind of put our heads together and come up with, but we're here to hear feedback. We have a public comment period that we're accepting comments in writing until August 19th. Is that the right date? And I'll put the email address up. But at some point we'll probably get to a point where we're ready to do formal rulemaking, and that's when we submit the proposed rule to the Interagency Committee of Administrative Rules and the Secretary of State's office, and that opens up the formal public comment period, and we'll have more public meetings, and then we would submit the proposed rule to the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules. And if after they adopt it, it gets filed with the Secretary of State and the rule is adopted. So that's like the typical rulemaking process. There could be back and forth iterations. It doesn't always run that smoothly. But our goal is, if everything runs smoothly, is that we'll have this pre-rulemaking phase, and then we'll kind of share what we've come up with from everybody's feedback in early fall, September or so, and hopefully submit something to ICAR in late 2025. And that would have a new rule in place for the 2026 season. So yes, the written public comment period is open until 4:30 p.m. on August 19th. And there's an email address up there. And all the information I'm sharing, recordings of this webinar, additional documents, any updates we have, it's all going to be shared on the Lakes and Ponds Rulemaking webpage. If you Google Vermont Lakes and Ponds Rulemaking, that's the webpage that'll come up. But we'll keep everything there. That email address on how to submit a comment is also on that webpage. Okay, so now we're going to transition into the discussion portion of the meeting. And what we did last night, we were in this room that had like the best technology. It had microphones built into the ceiling, and everything worked very smoothly. But what we'd like to do is kind of take turns making comments or asking questions. We'll ask one person in the room and one person online. Remember, if you're in the room, you need to hold this microphone and speak into it. And so you could just raise your hand. We have outlined some topics to talk about. So we'll start with a specific topic, and it would be great if you could stick to that topic. There's a other section at the end with your opportunity to bring up all other topics. Please remain respectful. This is generally a very respectful group, but I just want to remind everybody that we all care deeply. And then let's try to keep comments concise so that everyone has time to share. And we're excited to hear your comments and suggestions. And, we're taking notes and yeah. Okay, so the list that I have is, I feel like the biggest change that we're proposing is the changes to the definition of a wake sport zone. So that's where we'll go first. Then we'll talk about safety offsets, municipal delegation, the home lake rule, proof of decon replacement with the decontamination language, and then we'll move into other topics. All right, so this first topic is about the changes to a wake sport zone definition. Is there anybody in the room that would like to? Okay.
My name is Jim Lingle from Lake Elmore and the Responsible Wakes for Vermont Lakes. The first item in the change of the wake sport zone definition is making them at least 3,000 feet in length. Is that correct? So we support this longer distance requirements. It takes at least 3,000 feet of distance for a wake surf boat to accelerate, raise and tune its wave as the surfer stands up, then more distance for the surfer to stabilize on the wave before he or she drops the rope. Then you get some distance to actually surf for perhaps a minute, followed by more distance as the surfer leaves the wave, the boat decelerates and returns back to pick up the surfer. This takes 3,000 feet at least. And we have on our website an animation that shows how this occurs. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. We'll take someone online first, and then we'll come back to the room. Did you happen to see? Okay, Peter Bestenbostel, could you unmute? Hello? We can't hear you. Yeah, maybe we should try somebody else online just to make sure we can hear.
I think, can you hear me? This is Gretchen. I was next in line.
Yes.
Oh, great. Do you mind if I jump in? I think Peter dropped and is trying to come back.
Go right ahead.
Okay, great. So I have kind of a comment and then a question. I'm struggling in my mind listening to all these changes because a lot of it feels conflicting. So early on, you were talking about the fact that this governing body is approaching this with a least restrictive approach. And yet you then went on to say we are the most restricted in the nation with these rules. So that conflict is very confusing for myself, someone who loves wake sports. And I'm trying to understand why specifically the 50 acres was increased to 100 to support what you're saying is multiple boats and runs, when in reality, we're talking about less than 1% of boats on the water are wake boats. So there's something that is not jiving for me, and I would like to hear Jenny or Laura speak a bit more about how you came up with the 100 acres versus, say, 75. That's my question.
All right. I can, but could you? Yeah. Sorry, we were having an echo moment.
Were you able to hear me?
Yeah, so the way we came up with the 100 acres was based on those dimensions and putting that over wake sport zones. And as I mentioned, you could really, it was kind of stark that anything under 100 acres, you could only fit that one pass. And yeah, couldn't quite fit a whole rectangle on anything less than 100 acres. And so that was kind of where why that threshold came there. And, you know, we, as the agency, we have been receiving requests from lakes across the state for a ban. And this isn't the reason that we came up with this rectangle, but I think that looking at changing the shape, the size of wake sports zones is less restrictive than an outright ban statewide, what isn't something that we were contemplating an outright statewide ban, but it's a less restrictive approach than an outright ban.
And I hear that, and I understand that that is the most restrictive, but what is being placed is not the least restrictive. It is highly restrictive.
So I think we had another comment you had your hand up before about the zone, or did you? Here, you've got to speak into the microphone.
So, hi, I'm Owen, and how about we just tell all the kayakers to stay like 500 feet away from the wake boats, and then tell the wake boats to stay away from the rocks for the loon's nest. Yep.
Thank you. All right, we'll take one more in the room, and then we'll go online.
Hello, my name is Shane Switzer, and just to counter the point that the gentleman made up here about the 3,000 feet, citing a couple of sources, industry sources, the average run is about 2 minutes long, and you know, going 11 miles an hour, you need about 1,600 feet. There's more to it than that, but just because their website says 3,000 feet with no other additional sources does not mean that that's how much it takes. Thanks.
Jim Morgan.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'm Jim Morgan. I live on Lake Fairley, and I have the only operational wake boat on the lake. I'm totally disappointed by this process. These rules from April of 2024 were not even dry when people began petitions to eliminate them. No one, especially our lake, took the opportunity of last year to make critical observations. And the perfect example is, let's see what the average wake boat, how far it actually goes for a run for individual behind it. Our evidence is it's probably about 1,800 feet at a max. We have strong young men behind the boat, but even they get tired. That's the first thing. The second thing is I have no idea why you're going through this entire process again, because I follow the literature, as does my family, and I see no significant change scientifically to any of this information, none, and none's been quoted. So that's disappointing. And then the third is we have tried to protect our lake as best we can in every way possible. In fact, this year or last year, we had 2 loon couples who decided to mate and produce chicks on our lake, but one loon couple unfortunately chose a public walkway to do it in and abandon their nest. So I don't understand what brought us to this point. I think there's plenty of opportunity to observe, make observations, find out the correct information. How long are the runs on average is a great example, but there are many, many more. And then sit down in an honest discussion, look at the facts that we've gathered. There's certainly lots of opportunity, and make reasonable decisions if we find there are things that just don't work, like decontamination. Now, our boat never leaves the lake. So we get on it, we stay on it, and we take it off. And that's true for most of the wakeboards across the state. As you mentioned yourself, only 20 or so were entering different bodies of water at any time during the season. So the facts conflict what's being suggested here. And I would just hope you would take a moment, a deep breath, not make a rule change, but rather make a reasonable statement as to how we can approach the questions, because the information is there, and that would make me much happier. Finally, last comment, Lake Fairleigh varies anywhere from 92 to 104 acres, depending on time of year, time of day, and time of season where you make the observation. To eliminate us because you've chosen a lower number than 100 seems unfair. In fact, if you look through your own documents, you've chosen 3 different numbers. On one graph, it was 90, another statement, it was 94.2, and then somewhere else it was 96 point something. And I can show you documents that quoted at 102. So there are standard deviations in the way these are measured. That was not addressed, and I don't want to be targeted and lose my privileges on this particular lake. So thank you very much, and I continue to be part of the process.
Right. Jack.
So thank you for having this public meeting, Jenny and Laura. I'm Jack Widness. I'm with Responsible Wakes for Vermont Lakes. And I would like to point out that the 3,000 foot that we have on our website came from information we got from the industry. And they were talking about going out to 4,000 feet. So I encourage you to look at that website. It did come from the industry. The other points I'd like to make about this is that Responsible Wakes advocates based on new science, as well as what the DEC has said before, an even greater distance than the 500 foot from shore and a greater depth. There's been new data that's been presented that shows bottom disturbances from prop wash down to 26 feet, including the increase in phosphorus, which was one thing that the DEC had told us that they wanted to look at. So there's new data which occurred last fall. In addition, with respect to the distance from shore, if you read the basis for the most cited study, which was from the University of Minnesota, in terms of distance from shore with environmental and wave changes, the distance that they recommend for power and energy, which is much more important than wave height because that causes disturbance in the shore, is 600 feet. And if you include, they said actually more than 600 feet. They didn't want to stop at 600 feet, but was more than that. So as we mentioned last night, we advocate the precautionary principle, which means to do no harm, so that that distance should be extended. So our recommendations would be to go to the 100 acres as they proposed, with a depth of 30 feet minimum and a distance of 700 feet. And if you were to plot that out the way Laura was talking about with a 3,000 foot run, 3,000 feet with 700 feet on both sides, it's almost exactly 100 acres. So that's another reason that at least our group supports what the DEC has recommended here. Thank you.
And then online, do we? All right, Janice. Hello, Janice. Oh, you're muted. You see the mute button in the top right, Janice? I can't hear you. It shows that you're muted. You've got to hit the mute button in the top right that says mic. We can't hear you. Okay. Maybe you could type a question in the chat and we could read it out loud if you like. All right. Do we have any other comments about this wake sports zone definition in the room? Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Well, we'll jump to one more online and then we'll do the room. Emily?
Hi, thank you. I'm Emily Doe and I am on Lake Fairley. So obviously the part around moving from 50 acres to 100 acres is very sensitive to me. And one of the things when you were talking originally, Laura, I heard a lot of, we're looking for scientific, least restrictive. And then when you started talking about the moving from 50 to 100, I heard a lot of words that seems like potentially we feel, and I heard the gentleman before, and I understand that that is his resource of information. I also today spent a lot of time after last night's meeting looking through some of the Wisconsin information, and they have fantastic data about wave energy, speed, weight of a boat, space from the land. And so I really think, as with most anything in this world, unfortunately, we can all find points and value and scientific data that says one way or another what we're trying to prove. The one thing that just hit me, and I feel a little shocked and a little disappointed in, is I hear Responsible Wakes speaking, and it sounds like every recommendation that they have been supporting, and I'm good for that group, but it is exactly what you guys have in this presentation. This is exactly what you're proposing. And so I understand when you needed to say the home lake rule doesn't work, the decontamination, we don't have the resources in the state of Vermont. That all made sense for me why we needed to go back to the drawing board for this. But this feels a little sneaky that all of a sudden the words that Responsible Wake is trying to get into change is now set immediately as the proposed rules within Vermont. So I'm sorry that I sound upset. I've just all of a sudden felt like, is this process really listening to both sides? Because as I've said before, the wake sport group, enhanced wake sport group, has already made some compromises, made some restrictions, and I understand why, and I support the why, but the further we go, the more restrictive we're becoming, and that's frustrating to me. So that's where I'm at right now. My opinion and thoughts is around this moving from acreage to 50 to 100 is, there's a square there, there's a rectangle on Lake Fairley, and one rectangle is better than none. So, and I also just want to say, Owen, you did a great job. Way to stand up.
All right. I believe, was it you? Okay.
I'm Sarah Gluckman from Shadow Lake and Glover, and I love the numbers and the dimensions and the rectangles, but who is going to monitor this? Who is going to teach everybody where they're supposed to be? How do boaters know that it's only 40 feet out, it's still only 4 feet deep in parts of Shadow Lake? I mean, we're not on the list, but on some lakes, there are different levels. And how are boaters supposed to know that?
Thanks. I do want to just clarify that we have a lot of maps available, and we do have geo-referenced maps available on our website. That when we rolled out the original rule, there was a good amount of outreach to the public about those types of maps, so that if you were in your boat, you would know whether or not you were in the zone. But
people in a no wake zone 200 feet.
yeah, enforcement across the state is definitely, that's a whole nother topic, but there's, there are only so many game wardens and only so many boats. So there's not, that's, that's a whole separate issue. Yep. Okay. Another one online. Oh, Janice, did you?
I think so.
Okay, Janice, you're
Can you
unmuted.
hear me now?
Yes.
I'm picking up on what the prior speaker said. From the point of view of the agency, enforcement is another issue, but from the point of view of the people who are actually living on the lakes, it's a major issue and an extremely important one. Because people don't, I mean, they're supposed to have a boating certificate that they've passed a safety course. Nobody knows that that's supposed to be done. No boater that I know of on Willoughby talks about any such thing. So how are you going, how are we going to enforce these wake sport zones? And to begin with, my comment was, it appeared to me that some of them overlap. Some of the rectangles overlap. Is that true?
Yes.
So is that another confusing thing for the people who are running the boats?
Okay, I can try to speak to that, but I'm going to turn the echo off real quick. So the rectangles were really used as an exercise internally to determine the proper acreage that we were looking for a wake sports zone, for the size that would be appropriate for the practical use of ideally more than one wake boat. And so that's not something that the public needs to worry about in the practice of doing wake sports. The rectangles were really just an internal procedure that we use to draft this new rule. And then in terms of what was the other part of the question? Enforcement is definitely a great comment to make, and
issue,
we've gotten comments as
and
well
it's
from
been
the wardens
completely,
themselves about 200 versus 500. How easy is that going to be to enforce? Most boaters are really familiar with the 200 feet distance, the safety distance. Well, they're supposed to be. And there is supposed to be boater education that people take, as a part of registration. And, in order to be able to drive a boat in Vermont, you're supposed to take these courses, and that's part of the training. However, yeah, that's always room for improvement.
well,
So
is there any
hopefully I answered
proposal
that
for enforcement?
sufficiently.
If somebody is not following the
Let's
rules
see.
consistently.
Are we going online
I mean,
again?
what are we supposed to
Or-
do?
Okay, so in the room. Well, I don't really know of a way of limiting that. Can't really remember who spoke last night. Back in the back.
My name's Susan McKenna. I'm from Echo Lake, and I'm sorry.
We're both going to speak. I'll be quick. Betsy Walkerman, Lake Seymour. So I think another difficulty with the amount of space is that when a wake boat is in any given space, they dominate. And that means it's not like kayaks can be out there and sailboats can be out there and so on. It basically means that those boats are excluded from that space and the space around them because of perceived safety. And so I think in addition to there should be, just depending on the size of the lake, just one or two zones that are allowed for wake boats that are designated. I don't know if that's what you meant by this rule, that you're going to take those rectangles and then say, okay, here's the spot on this lake and here's the spot on that lake. It's really unclear to me, but I think there also should be at least a voluntary compliance with, say, a half-hour limit for the wake boat to be operating in wake mode, because it basically means that when they are out there operating, nobody else can launch. I couldn't launch a boat yesterday on Lake Seymour, half a mile away.
Okay, just to clarify again, that the rectangles really were an internal, just thing that we use to try to determine what the appropriate size of a wake sports zone should be based on all the feedback that we got about the conflict of uses and the domination of a wake boat when it's in using wake sports mode, and how other users really can't use that space. So we were trying to just graphically represent that space in a form of a rectangle. And we, discussion about how long and how wide that should be is why we're having these discussions. We're trying to hone in on what the appropriate balance should be. And the size of the wake sports zone, once, we decide where the threshold should be, the actual shape of the wake sports zone is based on the criteria that we have, where it's 500 feet from the shoreline, has to be at least 20 feet deep. So we have these maps available online. The current ones would end up being updated based on whatever criteria we settle on. But basically, the maps would be available for folks to see, and it wouldn't be rectangles, it would be the polygon, and it would be the shape smoothing that Laura was referring to before. So we're going to go online. Timothy?
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. I just wanted to make a couple points. I spend most of my summer on Lake Fairley. There was a brief discussion about crowding when it comes to, potentially multiple wake boats operating. I've been on that lake for at least 15 years. I've only ever seen one wake boat operate. It's never been two. So the crowding thing is either an exaggeration, or it's certainly not present where I do my boating. So that's one thing. There was talk about this, the least restrictive approach. And as somebody who does wake surf on Lake Fairley, it feels very restrictive, because if these rules are put in place, then me personally, my one hobby that I'm able to do at my, slightly advanced age, because at this point, wakeboarding, kneeboarding, water skiing, they're just too fast and aggressive. Wake surfing is sedate and it's relaxing, and it's something I'm able to do easily without hurting myself. So it feels very restrictive. That seems like it's going to be taken away from me. There was mention of, while wake boats are operating, other users can't use that space. I would say that is not true. I routinely see all the boats from the camps operating in that same space at the same time. We routinely see kayakers, paddleboards, any other motorboats operating perfectly fine in that same space. What I've found is boaters tend to be pretty courteous about giving each other proper spacing and whatnot. So I just think some of these issues that are brought up just aren't true, at least. And I have firsthand experience. I'm on the lake, I'm watching it happen. And I just think that some of these comments get, exaggerated as they get retold. So ultimately, I am not support of changing these rules because it will personally exclude me from my one water-based hobby, and that feels very personal. Thank you.
Okay. I'm thinking, for time's sake, that we do one more in the room about the definition and one more online about the definition, and then we'll move to another topic, and we'll kind of go through these topics, but then everyone, we want to hear what you have to say, and we will review written comments with the same level of interest and care and thought. So you can submit written comments if you don't get to say something tonight that you really wish you could have said. And also there might be some time at the end to also bring up the topic again. So anything else on the wake sports zone definition? I thought I saw a hand. Okay, yep, there we go.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer Andrews. I live on the shores of Shadow Lake. And I wanted to address one of the women who was online who was confused about why the DEC has changed some of the footage requirements. First of all, I do appreciate all the work that the DEC has done, although I'm not in favor of all of the changes. I do appreciate that they have changed some of the numbers. The reason for those number changes were for safety precautions. That was not able to be checked the last time that we went through this rulemaking process. And the reason that the numbers are different now the 500 feet from shore, the 300-foot run, the 100 acre, the normalization. The 20-foot hasn't been changed yet, but I think that the precautionary principle will certainly show that the depth needs to be changed where a wake boat can operate. But all of those numbers were changed because the DEC had time to look at the safety ramifications of wake boats within a body of water. And I just wanted to address that for everybody in the audience. Thank you.
All right, so we'll do one more online. David Kidney?
Thank you. Yeah, my name's David Kidney. My family's had a camp on Joe's Pond since the 1950s. And I very much appreciate everything the DEC has done, listening to all the petitions, having the hearings, weighing all the evidence. And I support the 3,000 foot length. I support the 100 acres. I filed on behalf of the Joe's Pond Association, the town of Danville, and the town of Cabot, the petition to prohibit wake sports on Joe's Pond. And the gist of our argument was that 50 acres was too small. And that turned out to be the gist of most small lakes with a similar argument. And the facts were, and I think you heard it overwhelmingly in public testimony, that wake sports in that small a zone usurped the area, and traditional normal users couldn't use it. And safety was a huge issue. So I fully support the 100 acres. I fully support the 3,000 feet. I think the sentiment around Joe's Pond and the town of Cabot and the town of Danville is almost universal jubilation about this, that we can get our pond back. And thank you very much.
They moved on to the next topic, but I'm not hearing anything.
Or you try unmuting briefly and see what happens.
Laura, people online can't hear anything. I don't know if you can hear us, but we're not able to hear anything right now.
We can't hear you at all.
Laura, we can't hear anything.
And chat doesn't seem to be working either.
We can't hear you, and there are other people that would like to speak to this topic.
Laura, we can't hear you. Jenny?
Yeah, you're not muted.
Okay.
Can I hear you?
Somebody who has a working camera can start waving their arms and maybe catch their attention.
He can't hear you. I think they might know now.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I can hear myself. Sorry about that, everyone. Okay, I think we're going to take a question online, right, Laura? Linwood Mixer. Go ahead.
All right, last night I attended the meeting and we got into the discussion on the distances, et cetera. And just to give my name one more time, it's Linwood Mixer. I was a 25-year safe boating instructor here in the state of Vermont. We used to go to the students when we had them in class. We'd take them outside. We'd ask them to show us 200 feet. They had no idea where 200 feet were. They always were coming up short. We talked about, I mentioned last night that 200 feet is a problem right now. No one understands it, recognizes it, knows how to measure it. And if going to 500 feet is going to be even worse, if you're using a device to try and measure the distances between the vessels or between shore and a vessel, then how do you become an expert if you wanted to testify that at a rule change or a rule, what do I want to say, violation? That's going to be a problem. Enforcement, I can see this is going to be a real, it's already being a benefit issue with 200 foot. It's going to be really an issue at 500 foot. And talking with different law enforcement officers, that's been the general gist of it over the last 10 years or so. The lady that mentioned about having information, the person has to take a course to have a boat. No, if you're born after January 1st of 1974, you then have to have a boating safety course from any state as it's U.S. Coast Guard approved. And at the same time, each state is different. New Hampshire only has 150-foot distances. So to get everybody tuned into 200 feet has been a challenge. Going to 500 feet, I can see is going to be a real challenge. You also mentioned, I think, Laura, that you said that you received letters from lakes for the ban or the changes. And I want to know, is there a list of those lakes that submitted letters? And I'd like to know, was it submitted on behalf of the association? Yeah, so I'd like to see that because I know at our lake, it's never been brought up as whether the lake members or the property owners around the lake are looking for that. So as I mentioned last night, I think there's certain people in certain lakes that don't want motorized boats, period. And I think that this is where a lot of this is stemming from. I know it is on our lake. And from last night's conversation, it seems to be that's the case. So thank you very much for allowing me to talk. And I hope the meeting continues going and doing well here. Thank you.
Just to let you know, all the petitions that were submitted requesting bans on wake sports are on the Lakes and Ponds rulemaking webpage. If you Google Vermont Lakes and Ponds rulemaking webpage, you can see links to all of those documents.
Thank you.
All right. We'll take a couple more on the safety offset in the room. Do we have somebody? Okay. All right. Nobody else has.
This is Jim Lingle from Lake Elmore. We support the increasing of the distance for swimmers and other floating objects and vessels from 200 to 500 feet. This is not only consistent with the existing Vermont statute, it's also consistent with traditional maritime law. We would request that this be increased to 700 feet to better reflect the most recent research and the recommendations of your own DEC staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura, is there someone online? Peter, Best Impossible. Peter, you can unmute yourself. Peter, Best Impossible. Who's the next? Jennifer LaRose.
So. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to speak. This is Jay Dunlap. I'm here with Jennifer Loros. We're on Lake Maury. 3 points, and I'll try to be brief. In terms of safety, the width estimate seems to assume that the wave dissipates as soon as it reaches the boundary, but in fact, the wave is going to propagate. So a 3-foot wave at the edge of the 500-foot boundary will still be a wave of unacceptable height a quarter of a mile away. And it will absolutely contribute to shoreline erosion. We see this all the time. The second point is when a wakeboat is operating, it plainly endangers kayakers and canoeists and paddleboarders. Wake boats are not mutually compatible with other uses. A wake boat in use means that others can't use the same space. And I must absolutely, respectfully, completely disagree with prior comments saying that the waves created by this don't pose a danger in the zone. Third, as you'll admit, the regulations for decontamination are completely unenforceable. Regulations keeping boats within a, quote, wake sport zone are completely unenforceable. This is just open season on small lakes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to jump to the next topic. This next one, there may not be, this might be a very quick one. There may not be a lot of interest in this. It is kind of detailed, but I just wanted to bring it up because if you do look at our track changes documents of proposed language, this one is very lengthy. This is the proposed additional language about municipal delegation. So there's, I didn't, it's, the language is lengthy and it's very filled with legalese, but the main idea is to formalize the process, identify roles and responsibilities, identify cost burdens, enforcement of responsibilities, what kind of rulemaking could be done, and the clarification from the statute that delegated municipalities are required to adhere to the use of public waters rules. So I just wanted to bring this section up because it's a lot of language in there. And if you have a chance to read it, if you haven't had a chance to read it now and it does interest you, you can always read it and send us a comment. But I wanted to open the floor to see if there were any questions about that. All right, we've got one question in the room.
Yes, can you clarify what a lake management activity would be? And if a lake were reclassified to A1, would that be considered lake management?
So a lake management activity is specifically like a in-lake management activity. For example, the application of alum to treat cyanobacteria blooms, chronic cyanobacteria blooms. We have a couple of those in Vermont, a couple lakes where we've done those kind of treatments. And so, yeah, this is something that fits more in our wake sport zone definition and our management of that rather than municipal delegation, just to let folks know. But so if a lake, for example, were to meet the criteria to have a wake sports zone, but it also were to have received an alum treatment to control cyanobacteria, and the lake was maybe particularly shallow or something where there was concern that the downdraft could stir up the sediments. And for those of you who don't know about alum treatments, the alum is a substance that you apply to a water body and it binds to the phosphorus and it sinks down and it keeps all that available phosphorus from being in the water column and causing cyanobacteria blooms. So this treatment is very expensive and there's a lot of permitting and it takes years and years to get it done. So if we were worried, if there was legitimate concern that wake sports could undermine all that effort to control cyanobacteria blooms, that could potentially be a legitimate reason to take it off the list. So it's very much tied to management and not classification. Are there any questions specifically having to do with municipal delegation online? I know that folks have their hands up. I'm wondering if we should. Okay. Janice, it looked like you kind of waved your hand. If you could unmute again. If you got to hit the unmute button.
Yeah. How's that? No?
Good.
There's a lot of local regulations in the lakes I don't know whether it's in Minnesota or Wisconsin. There's several localities that have taken over the ability to do that. And I haven't investigated it, but it's not an uncommon thing. And I don't know all the reasons why they do it, but it is done elsewhere. And I'm not suggesting we encourage it or anything else, but I just wanted to bring that up as a point.
Thanks. So what she was referring to is that in other states, there are localities that make rules about specific lakes. In Vermont, it's very much from a statewide perspective. But I think she was saying Wisconsin and Minnesota perhaps have some local, like municipal level regulations for lakes.
But wouldn't this category we're talking about, wouldn't that allow for that?
Okay, we have one more question about municipal delegation and then we'll move on.
My name's Pam Lads. I live in Newport. This lake, which we've managed to avoid talking about so far, is the lake that I kayak on regularly, and I'm an open water swimmer. So I have a lot of concerns about wake boats, but that's not the point of this comment. It's true that the state does regulate all of the water, for better or for worse. What it boils down to, though, is you guys make the rules. Regardless of what we say, you make the rules. This input, whatever that means, but you guys make the rules, and we know that. And what it comes down to then is an unfunded mandate for those of us living here. So there will be all these brilliant ideas, as there are currently, about the certification, about the making sure that boats are inspected, but who's going to do it? We don't have the resources to do that. We can't monitor the boats that go onto the lake. We have to trust that they will do that for themselves. And some of them are responsible boaters. They care about the lakes they live on, that they wake boat on, or any other sport. But a lot of others don't. And we can't assume that it's not okay for the state to assume that they can make the rules and then just kick it out to the rest of us and say, okay, guys, carry on.
Thank you. Jason Macharka.
Sorry, that was left over from the 500-foot rule, so I can wait until the other conversation if people have
Gotcha.
something specific for the municipal delegation.
Okay, sorry about that. Is there anyone else online who has a comment about the municipal delegation? Paul Pinar?
Yes, this is Dorothea Pinar and Paul Pinar. Actually, our hand was up before. We just wanted to support Dave Kidney's comments about Joe's Pond. We do appreciate the changing of the rules of acreage, etc. We support the 500-foot distance, and really do appreciate the changes in the rules and making it safe again on Joe's Pond. We do have issues now of milfoil and a great amount of concerns about wake boating exacerbating that situation. I'm sorry that this is sort of out of line of what you were discussing about the municipal. But I appreciate the changes and very supportive of it. We are landowners on Joe's Pond. Thank you.
All right, so we'll go to the final scheduled conversation, and this is the removal of the home lake rule and decon section and replacing it with additional language that is meant to meet our spread prevention goals with the limited infrastructure we have. And just to go over it, is we want to reference the transport law to that and clarify that the spread of aquatic invasive species from water to water is against the law. And we want to add enforcement and penalty language to talk specifically about how those violations are calculated, to kind of give us a little bit more enforcement backing. And we'd like to more clearly identify the greeter and agency roles and responsibilities, and how, more clearly link exactly how the procedures that have to be followed. So we'll start with a question in the room and then we'll go online. Think all the way back here first, and then we'll get you the next time. Yeah, sorry.
Hi, my name is Kit Walker. My husband, Rob Hoffman, and I have been on Lake Seymour for over 25 years. And right off in the beginning, we were concerned about milfoil. We actually volunteered because we didn't have a greeter program. I don't know if we really helped much because we didn't have huge expertise, but it has been on our mind always, because once it's in, you're done. You are done. You're just fighting against it. And we have been on milfoil patrol for the last, I don't know, 15 years, where we go out on our kayak and we go back and forth and back and forth. We are doing the volunteer work that the state supports, but I am just not convinced that taking away the home lake rule is a good idea. I bet you guys know a lot more about this than I do, but I want you to really think, are you going to help protect Lake Seymour from invasive species? I think the pool-ins and the other responsible wake boat owners, I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about the people that may now come to Seymour because they can't go on other lakes. You really need to think about these changes, because once it's in, we're done. We're done. And I'm really frustrated with these changes without thinking that through and being convinced that you are really convinced that this is going to help us.
We're gonna go to online. Timothy Wenzel.
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. First, a quick question. Do our letters that were submitted previously to the last round of public meetings, are they being included or those need to be resubmitted?
Resubmitted.
Okay.
This is a different process that we're in now, right now.
Okay, a couple comments. And first, I'd like to comment on the last speaker. The greeters can't look inside the tanks of any boat. And so they're really not able to. They check whether there is milfoil on the trailer or the outside of the boat or the exposed part of the motor. So in no way are they inspecting whether or not there is residual milfoil or other things within those tanks. So I think it's unrealistic to somehow assume that that's going to happen. And certainly that applies to the boats that go to lake, not ones that are on it. But I would like to make another point and first add a little bit of context. I'm a professional engineer and I have designed seawalls on the coast in areas where the banks have eroded. And it was clear in all of the ones that I've worked on that what happens when the side of a lake is eroded is rock.
Uh-oh, I think we lost you.
Behind it, and then the material would then allow the wall to collapse.
Your connection seems to be poor.
So, I am sorry. Can you hear me any better now?
Yeah.
Okay, let me continue. So that's my concern, that the wake boats being a higher wake and especially in presence of high water is going to cause erosion around many of these lakes and will be in particular. And I am stating that I really feel like I have expertise in that area and have seen it happen in numerous cases and have designed seawalls to address that. I don't think there's anything here really covering that. And there was discussions about the length of a wake transmitting. The recent tsunamis ought to be proof that wakes don't dissipate as fast as you're implying that they do. We see sometimes a large wake in the water and we can't even see the boat that's further enough away. So certainly, and that's not even a wake boat. So that the wakes tend to go a long, long ways. And so that by limiting these distances, they're still going to happen. And lastly, with regard to enforcement, on Lake Willoughby, and I've been here for years, we see a police boat about once a year. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. All right. I think I promised you were next up.
My name is Dave Kelly, and I think one of the most important words in this entire conversation is decontamination. I don't see it defined in any of the draft rules, and I think the exact definition is critical to the entire process. And I would like to know what your definition is and when we can see it in writing.
So yes, we have our decontamination requirements on our website. There should be a link to it from the rulemaking page, I believe. There might be. We can add it, but it is on our website. And the definition is not meant to be final and set in stone. It's meant to be something that we can update as technology improves, as our understanding of the scientific literature out there improves, and as our infrastructure improves. So this is a adaptive management, plan that we have. We have a watercraft inspection and decontamination stakeholder process that we're going through right now, where we're trying to come up with program alternatives to be able to make our program better and to make decontamination infrastructure better. We understand very much, very, very intimately that the greeters are not really trained. They don't have the all the equipment necessary to be able to decontaminate wake boats. We understand that, recognize that. So we're trying to develop like options throughout the state that people can go to. So it wouldn't be that they would have to have a thorough inspection and decontamination at the particular lake they're trying to enter, that they would have to go somewhere. They would have to get it done at the boat dealer or at the state approved decon service place. So we have some already on Lake Champlain. We're trying to develop more. We have a pilot right now set up here at the Newport Center this summer that our state staff has been manning, but not like every day. It's sort of just to collect some data, see how feasible it would be to expand it. But like Laura's mentioned before about administrative burdens and our limited staff capabilities at the moment, our lack of funding, we don't have the ability to just create state approved, stations all over the state. So we're working on it. I think we got to go to someone on. Sure, well, that's fair.
What I hear you saying, and please be clear, is that you are not going to define the word decontamination in any of the rules.
Oh, well, the rules will reference what the state approved decontamination requirements are, so that those are, it's in a document we have that the state maintains.
I was just going to say sure, the decontamination requirements are also different for different types of scenarios and different type of watercraft. So for example, something with a ballast tank, we might have different recommendations or requirements than rinsing off a boat trailer or something. So there's different types of decontamination, and also depending on the type of thing that's getting decontaminated.
No enforcement for any of this.
We
read this.
We don't really want to put it in the rule, and here's why. Because when you put it in a rule, in order to make any change, any tweak to those rules, you have to go through this 6 to 8 month process. So it's better to reference what the state approved requirements are. And we have a PDF, and it's pretty lengthy because, like what Laura was saying, we have different requirements for different watercraft and different scenarios. If you have hot water available, this is what you do. If you have cold water available only, this is what you do. And then there's drying times as well as an option to give people some flexibility.
The essence of my question is the concern about invasives and the concern that we don't really have a way to clean ballasts. And I guess what I'm asking is whether or not there will be a standard that says ballasts have to be cleaned or not.
Yes, I'm saying there is a standard for ballasts to be cleaned, and there is a methodology to do so.
And that will be incorporated in some definition.
It is, yes, it's incorporated into the requirements, the document that we have posted on our webpage for people to reference. I think we're going to skip to online, and then we'll come right back to the room. The microphone.
It is. You mean milfoil.
The microphone is only for online.
You
It's not.
put that.
Okay.
I apologize. I have a problem with projecting my voice. I'm sorry.
Absurd is not the right word. I mean, I agree with you,
Okay.
but
I just want to say that
well-meaning,
effectiveness
but,
is the measure of success. The most important thing
ultimately not effective.
is those ballasts being clean before they go into a
Ineffectual.
lake.
Yeah, right.
I am going to stick up for Willoughby, but I stick up for all the lakes.
Oh,
If you care about Willoughby, which you appear to, I want people to have fun. I want them to enjoy the lake. But if the dirty ballasts go into the lake and then they have fun, I think you know that for that boat in and out, not not someone on the lake, but someone who comes to visit, because that's how our lake is, that gets dumped by our fishing access, our boating access. So any invasives are there because that isn't clean before it goes in. It's not possible. We don't have the resources, and I don't think we have the techniques to ensure that that is clean going in. So when they come out, because of the weight, whatever's in there that's
Number
not
one.
clean gets dumped there. So I
In
would
the
say
first
there are people
sentence,
here
and
whose
you could
concern
say,
that
in
is.
reality,
And I'm
waves
not saying
propagate.
Willoughby is better than any other lake, because I care for all the lakes. But maybe you want to hold that image of what Willoughby is in your mind's eye, so you don't have to be part of what it no longer is at some future date.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Laura. Oh, Debbie, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. My husband and I are landowners at Lake Parker, and I support the changes in the zone for supporting wake sports. Our small lake really could not support wake sports and still maintain water quality and avoids erosion and the safety, because I have small grandchildren who swim. But I support that for all the lakes. Addressing this issue of enforcement and administrative burden, I think a simplification to just limit wake sports to some large lakes like Champlain and Memphremagog and maybe a few others, then you could concentrate enforcement and cleaning to a smaller area, and it might be feasible. Because I would be also very concerned of bringing in invasive species and just the general reduction in water quality, along with safety concerns at all the lakes. And we have to be realistic about what a small state, a small population state like Vermont can manage when it has so many lakes that draw visitors because of their existing water quality and opportunities for traditional uses. So thank you for giving me a chance to speak.
Okay, thanks. All right. We'll go, sorry, right behind you.
Hello, I'm Shane Switzer again. I could, sure. So when we're talking about AIS here, everybody in this room wants clean lakes. But why are we not talking about any other types of boats? What their from their report, 20,000 launches were recorded and 180 something were wake boats. Are we not concerned about the other boats? Every single boat that gets launched in or out of the lake has residual water in it, in the bilge, in the plumbing. The fishing boats will take live wells from here to other lakes. It's facts from this same report that the wake boats aren't moving around the state. Why is this group not standing on the steps of the state house saying we got to ban fishing boats? I don't understand. Fishing boats are the most likely boats to go from here to Willoughby that we all care about. That's my home lake, and I that's where I keep my boat, and that's this lake is full of zebra mussels and all that. We don't want that in our lake, but nobody cares about the fishing boats that are going from here. They're coming from Canada that are coming down. Why are we not on the state house looking to ban fishing boats? And when you just, all you have to do is look at the report and do the simple math. And it's mind blowing to think that why are we still talking about this with wake boats? And I understand that wake boats carry more water. There's more residual water than other boats, but just do the pure math of it. And you'll see very quickly that there's thousands and thousands and thousands of other boats that nobody says a word about. And as far as what we learned last night about this, about what the state's trying to do with change this, the home lake rule, it's not enforceable. We could talk about enforcement until we're blue in the face here. It's not going to do us any good. They don't have the resources to enforce any of this stuff. So what they're doing is they're moving it over to the transport law that is going to, all boats have to follow the transport of AIS. So why wouldn't we move wake boats over into that? That seems to make sense. So one of the things to note is I called somebody in the Westmore Association and recently and said, hey, let's work together. There's a group of us that own wake boats. Let's work together and put a decontamination station in. Let's figure it out. I have no idea how much it costs. I have no idea. I haven't done any research, but let's figure it out. No. There's no way we could do that. It costs $50,000. $50,000 isn't that much money. The state has about $1 million a year that they dole out in grant funds specifically for to tackle AIS, and a lot of it's used for the greeter program. But in order for me to pursue that, I would have to go through the Lake Association, and the immediate answer that I got was absolutely not. We can't do that because it costs too much money. So just think about that when and why are we still talking about AIS when it comes to wake boats and trying to make more prohibitive rules, and why are we not talking about other boats or all boats? The last thing I'll say is I was in Montana last week and they have boat inspections there, and they inspect every single thing that goes into the water outside of the lake. It's not right at the launches, it's outside. They inspect kayaks, anything that would ever go into the water. So it's not just wake boats that are transporting aquatic invasives, and aquatic invasives were around long before wake boats were.
Thank you. Rusty, online. Rusty?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I'm Rusty Newhouse. I've summered in Greensboro for about 60 years and currently live on Caspian Lake. And there are 100 things I'd like to say, but I think the most important thing for right now is this enforcement issue. And I really don't understand the amount of time and effort that has, while I appreciate it, the amount of time and effort that's been given to try to put together rules and regulations and all of the things that we would like people to do. I heard someone say they hadn't seen a state police officer on their lake in, maybe once a year. I'd have to say I haven't seen one in 5 years on Caspian. I'm sure somebody's been here, but I haven't seen it. And I just think that before we start allowing wake boats there's the disruptions. I mean, I could go down a list of all the reasons why it just doesn't work. But those aside, to come out with rules and regulations that can't be enforced just seems like it seems like the warning labels on cigarettes. The cigarette companies thought it was a great idea that they could have the warning labels, and that made it okay to sell cigarettes when in fact people were dying. I agree with the woman who said that once the milfoil comes onto the lake and it's in, and you can't get rid of it. Caspian's trying to be classified as an A1, if that's correct, lake. We've had citizens here working on water quality for over 50 years. And we work really hard to try to keep it that way. One boat that comes in, that has milfoil, that dumps its tanks, and it gets into the water, it's over. And I just think that we need to first say, let's come up with a way that we can enforce rules, whether it's cleaning stations or something else, then allow the boats into the lake. Let's not allow them into the lake with knowledge that no matter what they do, that there's nobody that's going to enforce it. That if somebody goes flying by and you report a car with a certain license plate that they were going 50 miles an hour in a 25 zone. Nothing ever happens. And that wouldn't happen. Sorry, I've taken too much time, but I really think that we should not allow wake boats until we have a means to check their tanks and to enforce any of the rules and regulations that you come up with. Thank you.
All right. In appreciation of time, I think we'll take one more in the room and one more online about the home lake stuff, and then we'll open it up to the other topics. So here we go.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank DEC for putting this all together. I hope that our voices are listened to. To the person who was talking about wake boats versus the rest of watercraft, wake boats do pose a much greater risk. They're in a wake boat bows are between 8 and 23 gallons of water that can come into the water body. Other boats, and I totally agree that fishing boats are definitely a vector. Being a greeter, I've been a greeter and run a greeter program. I worked at Willoughby for 3 years and then back to Seymour. So being a person who's on the ground and being a greeter, you're absolutely right about the fishing boats. But that's why home lake rule is important. So most of the other boats can be decontaminated easily, but wake boats have a closed system. And that's why home lake rule is important. And so we've only heard bad things about home lake rule. So I want to say some good things. First of all, you mentioned that there was a large administrative burden with the identification and tracking of wake boats throughout the state. I don't believe that that's even necessary. And I don't think it's stated, and I could be wrong, I'm not good with regulations, but I don't think that's specifically stated in the regulation for home lake rule. With only 18 lakes left, the local programs can do all the work. There's probably less than 60 wake boats that are on those 18 lakes. I'm pretty sure that Seymour has the most wake boats with 7. Some of them don't have any. So it's a really, really small number. And there's basically no administrative burden at all. Seymour has started their own registration process, and we have almost all of our wake boats registered. We have, this is our wake boat registration book. Every wake boat on our lake, except for one, I'm trying to get him. I know who he is too. So we developed our own form. There's a picture of each wake boat, except for Josh's. In the book. So we don't even need a sticker, although a sticker would be really easy for the greeters to recognize. There's no reason for the state to get more involved other than to pass regulation. Home lake rule can be done easily by the local programs. The local programs have had the burden of AIS prevention all along for the last 25 years. So there's really no reason for there to be any administrative burden at all on the state. And this has been, we have discussed this in the stakeholder process. So the state knows about this. So this is not anything new to them. Let's see, I have a whole bunch of stuff here. So just be, another good thing about home lake rule is, just in the process of us getting in touch with the wake boat owners, it's been such a great opportunity for us to communicate with them and to go back and forth. What are your needs? What are our needs? Like how can we educate you and how can you educate us? And I think also it's pretty normal, like somebody who's on a lake who like a wake boat owner who is on a lake, they have ownership. They have a connection to that water body, and they don't want AIS on their lake. So they're going to help us. They're a partner in this with the greeters. So that's a positive thing about home lake rule. And it doesn't even have to be a rule. It can be called an annual lake choice instead of a home lake rule. Each wake boat can choose the water body that they're going to be on each year. And if a wake boat doesn't choose one of the 18 water bodies, then they would just simply go to one of the unregulated water bodies. I mean, it's pretty easy. If somebody's visiting from out of state and they come to Seymour or Willoughby, we can just say, oh, I'm sorry, this isn't your home lake, but there are other water bodies nearby that are unregulated that you can go to. So I think that there's been a lot of unnecessary, Jimmy said panic, but no, it's the difficulties have been kind of exaggerated when it could be so simple. The home lake rule could be so simple. Or the annual lake choice could be so simple. Yeah, and also I want to, if you don't mind, I'd like to give Josh the microphone for a minute so he could read the letter. The wakeboat owners on Seymour got together and wrote a letter in support of the home lake rule. So I'd like Josh to read that. Yeah, no, read it also, please.
Get time for this? I'm not the fastest reader. So Jim Mitchell wrote this, which I don't even believe he has it. But anyway, my name is Jim Mitchell, and I have a place on Seymour Lake in Morgan, Vermont. I'm writing on behalf of the 7 wakeboat owners on Seymour to express our concern and support regarding the prevention of our lake's pristine condition. Please find the list of owners' names below for your reference. Seymour Lake is renowned for being one of the cleanest lakes in Vermont, and maintaining its exceptional water quality remains on our top priority. Wake boats, which are popular on our lake, use ballast tanks filled via pumps and valves to displace water and add weight. This additional weight helps create larger wakes for wakeboarding and wake surfing. Those same pumps and valves are used to drain the ballast tanks. In recent years, there has been ongoing discussion about how to properly decontaminate the ballast tanks in wake boats to prevent the spread of aquatic invasive species, AIS. Proper decontamination requires special training and equipment, neither of which has been made available to employees involved in the boat launch greeting programs. Without appropriate tools and training, it is extremely challenging to fully drain, clean, and decontaminate ballast tanks. This gap increases the risk of cross-contamination and transfer of AIS when boats travel between lakes. In addition, these ballast tanks are not easily accessible for internal inspection by the boat greeter. For reasons, wake boats should be treated differently, regulating drying time. If hot water decontamination is not available, then drying time must be required to kill any possible aquatic invasive species within the ballast tanks. Perhaps a protective and scientific-based quarantine policy could be adopted. The specific number of days for the quarantine period should be based on the scientific research. A quick and simple Google search indicates the drying time vary based on type of watercraft. However, wake boats and ballast tanks are recommended drying time of 30 days. It is our understanding that our affected lake association in Vermont supports the home lake provision. We strongly support the implementation of home lake rule for wakeboat owners. This would require wakeboat owners to declare a single home lake for a calendar year. This means the boat could only be used in specific lakes unless undergoing decontamination at the state-approved facility when moving to another water body. This measure is an effective way to safeguard Lake Seymour as well as other lakes from the aquatic invasive species. If the state does not have the resources to handle this requirement, let's allow the local greeter program to implement and execute the home lake rule. I know most of the employees at the local boat greeter program. They work ethic to keep our lake pristine and free from aquatic invasive species is exceptional. They are very familiar with the people on Seymour Lake and know who the wakeboat owners are. I have no doubt it would be a great fit for this. They would be a great fit for this task. Wakeboat owners with information regarding rules, safe and home lake declare to display on their boats significantly Seymour Lake as a home lake rule. Thank you for the opportunity to share our concerns and for your efforts to protect the health and clarity of Lake Seymour.
Oh, I'm not done yet. Well, I would like you to answer a few questions about 1454 in relation to incorporation into the use of public waters rules. Okay, 1454 is the aquatic transport law, and the proposal is to put it in the use of public water rules, correct? So 1454 is a great law. Unfortunately, nobody knows about it and it doesn't work. And as you can see from somebody who, oh shoot, what I do with it? Oh, here's the invasion curve. This is the invasion curve for AIS. If 1454 worked, the top of that would be flat. So it doesn't work. There needs to be more of something. One of the things that keeps coming up is enforcement. Well, we don't have any expectation of enforcement. And because we've heard around here, nobody has seen a game warden in 5 years or a year. We do have game wardens come to the lake and everything, but that's not the top. The enforcing the transportation law isn't the top of their list. I mean, there needs to be an educational component with the transportation law because nobody knows about it and it's not enforced. So I'm not sure how incorporating it into the use of public water rules is going to protect our water bodies. You also said that our water bodies would be protected if there's additional definition of agency and greeter roles. The greeters already know, what you put up there, that's up there right now, it says about the greeter roles that, the greeters are not allowed to turn any watercraft away. We know that. We all got threatened with losing our funding and not being able to work on the fishing access last year because somebody reported that one of the greeters turned a boat away. So we all know that we're not allowed to turn boats away. And I'm not sure I'm not sure how any of these things are going to meet the same standards of protecting us from AIS spread. And overall, so there are 18 lakes left that are going to be where wake sports are going to be allowed. 11 of those lakes are in the Northeast Kingdom. 9 of those lakes do not have invasive species. 5 of those lakes are eligible for A1 reclassification because they are high water quality resources and oligotrophic. I'm sure you do. So anyhow, that's why we should keep home lake rule.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move into the, it's after 8 o'clock, so I know this is the end of the meeting, but maybe we can give, we'll take if there's anybody from the other topic online that would like to speak for a moment, we can maybe just take, I understand if everybody has to go, but maybe we'll take like 2 questions online and 2 questions in person before we adjourn for the night. Okay, Jason Petrarca?
Yes, and you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I want to drop back to the 500-foot rule, but not specifically to that distance, but more to the fact that this rule puts 100%, at least the way I interpret it, 100% of the responsibility on the wake boat operator. And my concern there is we already know from some of the comments that there are people who are not in alignment with the proposed rules. So what is to prevent them from purposefully interfering with the otherwise safe operation of a wake sports in a wake sport zone? I think we need to make sure that there is some sort of language in there that basically says while these 500-foot barriers, 500-foot, distances are required, that it is unlawful for anybody to purposefully interfere with, impede, or otherwise harass wake sports in the wake sport zones who are otherwise operating lawfully. I see this as a I see this as a big issue, or something that could become a big issue by changing the 200-foot rule to the 500-foot rule. And then in addition to that, in agreement with something that was already said, the 200-foot rule is something that is taught in many boater safety courses around the US, not just in Vermont. And there are some variations, as we've heard, with New Hampshire and such. But this is going to be a big change from what is taught in the boater safety course that is typically accepted from state to state. So I think that, if we're going to go with that 500-foot rule, it leaves a lot of vagueness for people who are coming in, possibly from other states. And even if they're not coming here on a day basis, if they're moving from one state to another, it makes it very difficult to keep up with those changes. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Thanks. Name's Ram Hoffman. I would make this as restrictive as you could, but I recognize there has to be some give and take and compromise, as somebody said earlier. I think the wake boat owners and usage that we've seen has consistently been respectful and reasonable. So I wish the waves weren't there. I wish the boats were off, but there has to be give and take, and feel like we can compromise on the presence at all. What lakes are they on? What's the size? What's the distance? And people have been reasonable. What I don't think we can compromise on is the home lake rule and the risk of invasive species. Over years, I've served in several commissioner and secretary roles in state governments. So I have some understanding of the challenges you have and the fact that you've got to try and balance different constituencies, and that's hard. But I think it's utterly unacceptable for you guys to risk the contamination from some of these lakes that have scores of invasive species into some of the pristine lakes in this state, and you're not willing to come up with how it can work, and are instead trying to back out of a compromise that the ink is barely dry on from a year or two ago. So it's very discouraging that the Agency of Natural Resources, that should be protecting the environment, is willing to risk so much, and it's going to be so costly if the invasives spread further, and we're at great risk of that. So I think a reasonable focus on a few of the boats that present the biggest risk, and having a reasonable inconvenience of the home lake rule is totally doable. And don't abandon it. And there's, you're going to draw people who have not been activists coming out to fight you on this. So get ready. So thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to actually work this category, which is other criteria. And thank you for your comments, because I was going to back that up, that, Governor Scott had a second proclamation 2 years in a row directing DEC to do this job. And thank you for telling them. So what our petition said was, if we didn't have wake boats, we didn't want them. And I think there should be an added criteria, and it could be done in section 3.7 on wake sports, that if a lake does not have wake boats today, and there are four lakes, Averill, Caspian, Great Averill, and Willoughby, not Willoughby, Echo, that do not have any wake boats. They do not have resident boats, and they've had very, very little, Parker, right? And Shadow. So if these boats, these lakes, by petition, asked the state to exclude them from having wake boats in the future. And it's least restrictive because these lakes have never even had a boat. We're not restricting anyone who's ever wanted to come to Echo or Caspian. So it's least restrictive, but it's also precautionary, which is the other factor that's in balance here. So we want these lakes to be able to be eligible, non-eligible, and be possibly done by petition. And because we've got 1,200 registered voters in our area that are petition supported. And you all, the other lakes, had the same sort of thing. We have our municipality, our select board, all on board. We have our association all on board. We don't have these boats on our lake today. We don't want them tomorrow. They are a vector, a dangerous vector. Yes, we need to solve decontamination for all the fishing boats. This process has told me that we all our lakes are a threat to AIS, and particularly zebra mussels that went from this lake to Massawippi, and you can't go to Massawippi and bring it back to the United States. Can't go to this lake and bring it back to my lake. If I was standing with a greeter today, I'd say, go somewhere else. You're not welcome here. And it's just, so that's one criteria that I'd like you to add into 3.7 on wakeboat sports, that a lake should be able to petition to not have them. Now, Willoughby, and Seymour particularly, have found a way to work with their wakeboat. So not every lake's going to ask for that. They didn't ask for a petition. So let's, allow that to happen where it happens. And the other criteria that I want you to add is A1 classifiable lakes. If you're A1 classifiable, you should be able to petition to maintain that pristine water quality because there's just a few of us left. Thank you.
Thank you, Stu. I would just comment briefly that we're definitely open to the possibility of adding criteria to the statewide rule. And I would just recommend that that be the method of, because we're already in rulemaking right now. All a petition does is reopen rulemaking to then make modifications for just one specific lake. And for petitions, they're useful for when you have a scenario where it's really lake specific, like a really lake specific reason to not have a use or to change a use. So, while we're in the rulemaking process right now already, I would just recommend that we try to work on, if we wanted to add criteria like you were describing, that we would do that in the state.
Yeah, I thought that you may not want to. I asked you to reverse our denial and then allow our petition to go forward. And I understand you may not want to do that. So what we can do is add this criteria into your process. This is brainstorming. We're here to come up with new things and add it and make this thing better. So let's add this criteria in here, and maybe we'll repetition to get that for us and ask for that. Or it could go into your list of eligible. That's all right. Sorry. We're going to wrap this up quick. But the point I'm making is we could, if we're moving to a list and it can be more easily done than rulemaking to add a lake or not add a lake. If a lake falls out of A1 classification, you don't need to go and change the rulemaking. So I just say if a lake is asked to be ineligible, you set that, and then if something changes in the future, it could change. So maybe it's just managed in that level.
Thank you.
Okay. You got us.
Diane Leader, I'm at Willoughby and worked on the petition to prohibit wake sports on our lake. It is very difficult to even know how to respond to some of this right now because the petitions that were submitted last fall were denied without any kind of feedback at all.
So I have no idea what you read, what you heard about Willoughby, or about any of the other lakes that petitioned. We have no idea, where we stand or where our concerns. Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and wrap this meeting up. Please send comments, written comments to that email address. Again, if you Google Vermont Lakes and Ponds rulemaking, you will find that webpage. And we'll have a recording of this up online available tomorrow. We really appreciate all of your participation. I know this is tough stuff, and we just appreciate your feedback, and thank you for being involved.
Thank you.